NBC News was called out over their biased reporting of President Trump. Over the weekend, a Twitter user, Mark Hemingway, who is a senior writer at Real Clear Investigations, pointed out the bias in a tweet where he compared how NBC reported on President Trump rallies versus how they report on Black Lives Matter protests. Here's his tweet. On the left, it reads, quote, "Rally for Black trans lives draws packed crowds to the Brooklyn Museum Plaza," end quote. While the image on the right, which was tweeted a little over an hour later by NBC, shows a story from the Associated Press adding, quote, "President Trump plans to rally his supporters next Saturday for the first time since most of the country was shuttered by the coronavirus. But health experts are questioning that decision," end quote. Well, this only begs the question, why is NBC reporting that there are health concerns for large gatherings to one group, but not to the other group who's going out and protesting? Let's ask our guest, Special Assistant to the President, Kelly Sadler. Kelly, good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, I love when you can see things like this side by side because the bias just speaks for itself. Trump obviously coming out saying that the media is trying to COVID shame him about this upcoming rally. But it does beg the question. Like I said, you see that they're clearly not making it a point that there's concern for COVID about these protests, but you should be concerned if you go to a rally.
Yeah, well, I mean, this has been the coverage for the last 3 weeks. I mean, we've been seeing these protests in city after city. Literally overnight, the mainstream media changed its narrative from COVID-19 to systematic racism. And then there's been little coverage of COVID-19 since, except for when the president announces that he's going to restart his rallies. I mean, NPR even did a piece last week that interviewed many scientists saying, are you concerned about these protests? And what the consensus was racism is as dangerous as COVID-19. So if you want to get out there in the crowds and, speak your First Amendment rights, you should do so. But when you see conservatives trying to do the same thing, of course, there's backlash.
Kelly, it's as we've always said, it's not just what they cover, but what they don't cover, right? So last week there was this story about the cost of the National Guard that it was being tabulated to quell some of these protests. What was interesting is I have yet to see a single story about the cost to the damage done, the number of Black-owned businesses that were destroyed, the cost to them, the number of jobs that have been cost, all of these other things that you would think would matter. It seems as though if it doesn't go along with the narrative, then it doesn't count. And I would extend that to the sack of Captain Dorn, who we talked about last week in St. Louis. Why isn't his life being covered the same way that these other people who have been killed is? It's almost like they're making a choice as to what they decide to cover if it goes into their narrative versus what they do cover.
Well, Sean, you're absolutely right. And that is exactly what we're seeing. We're not seeing the stories of all of minority-owned businesses that have been destroyed because of the looting. CNN is reporting that these protests are largely peaceful. I mean, they did a stand-up where the guy was outside a burning police precinct saying that this is largely peaceful. I mean, well, we can see with our own two eyes that it's not. I mean, there's rioting and there's looting. And then, there's been more police officers injured. And we don't know what the final tally or the total is because the journalists just they're not reporting from both sides. They're acting more like activists, not non-biased journalists.
That's right. Yeah, I definitely see that over and over again. It's about their opinion and what they think, not the facts.
Yeah, and it definitely even plays into this defund the police narrative. They're pretty much giving them a pass. If they were real journalists, they would say, okay, here's what defund the police means. Let's break it down for you and show you both sides. But no, to your point, they're taking this activist mentality of saying, shedding those people in a great light. Yeah, we should defund the police. It's really interesting that they're not necessarily doing their job and helping people understand what does this really mean.
Yeah, but take it a step further. If you truly do believe to defund the police, to Lindsay's point, they need to expose what does a community, what does a town, what does a city look like with that. They don't want to do that because it won't make the left look good. So they kind of let them get away with saying this without having to be accountable for what it would mean.
Absolutely. I mean, and Joe Biden has said that he doesn't want to defund the police. And we've had some members, some Democratic lawmakers try to back away from this. And then you had the media trying to explain to us, well, defund the police doesn't actually mean defund the police. Yet at the same time, you have the New York Times writing an op-ed saying defund the police is literally what we mean. And then you see places like Minneapolis and in New York City where they are legitimately defunding the police. And so this is a narrative that needs to be covered. What are the ramifications of doing this? It's absolutely ludicrous, but it's simply not.
Well, because they know that if they go too far down this path, that people are they're going to really lose everyone who recognizes calling 911 and getting a social worker to respond to your burglary isn't going to work. So they keep trying to cover for them because that's the problem. They know that it's an untenable position, so they do everything they can to hide the reality and the accountability that needs to occur that would normally occur if this was the right. So it's truly malpractice, and I think you're right, Kelly, that it's gone beyond reporting and now it's gone activism, but also defending the problems that the left has because they don't want you to see the real tragedy that would occur if those policies went into place.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, you see it in Seattle right now with Chaz or Pop, whatever the new city is, where, the mayor is calling it the summer of love, but reporting on the ground actually shows something completely different. And it's an untenable situation that Seattle is currently in, and it must end. And you have the police commissioner there saying that there's 911 calls that are going unanswered, and there's rapes and a bunch of violence happening, but the mayor saying, oh no, this is off zone. This is an autonomous zone.
That's right. Well, thank you. This is so crazy how it's being reported. I appreciate your insight.
Thanks.
All right. Well, author Christina Meredith has made an incredible journey. She's gone from being sexually abused and homeless to being a commissioned officer